Wouldn't be a Law Hero video without pink fluffy pen or pink paper where I have all my notes written down. Okay everybody, it's been a hot minute because your girl has been moving house, as you can see, and I hate change and it was very difficult. I'm not going to jibber jabber. So today we're going to talk about why you fail EU law. I've already done a video on EU law before, back in November. I remember it very well. It was a really awful evening and I was like, I'm going to make a video about EU law. But this is a summer edition and we have included the March 2020 EU law paper in this summary we're going to do today. So you're covered. You're well covered if you're sitting the exam in August 2020 or indeed in September 2020, because there's a double dose because of COVID. So yeah, if you have not already purchased my EU law notes, they're on my website lawhero.eu, and in there you have everything you need to pass the exam. Real thin. I have these all printed for myself and it's really sad, but sometimes in the evenings I read them because I am terrified of forgetting things. So yeah, it's up to date for this year and you can get on my website, and right now we're gonna kick in and kick off proceedings. Okay, so the EU law exam for the FE1. Okay, so the very first thing I have written down here is that you have to answer 5 questions. And I know that seems really, really obvious, but I think I've said it time and time again. You will not pass any FE1 if you don't answer 5 questions. It is virtually impossible. It's not like in the Leaving Cert where you have like, if you get 450 out of 500 in English paper 2, you still get an A1, because me and my friends have worked this out. If you got 450 out of 500, as in you didn't answer your Shakespeare question, you could still get an A1. It doesn't work like that in the FE1 because the number of points for every question is so low. Okay? So it's like statistically not possible. Okay, that's the first one. Second one I've written down here is know the difference between TEU and TFEU. Okay, the examiner alludes to this at the very start. He talks about the TEU and TFEU as well as the Union Judicature. Judicature, I actually love that word. Judicature, because they are completely different treaties and you need to understand that. Now, don't worry if you're a little bit confused. Chapter 1 of your girl's ebook explains that very, very well. All right, so I go through, I call it from Rome to Lisbon. Wouldn't you love to go from Rome to Lisbon right now? But we can't. And that'll explain to you the difference between the TEU and the TFEU. How I remember it is the TEU is like the grounding, it's like the Bible, it's like the principles, cornerstone of the EU is in there. And then the TFEU is like, as it says in the title, the functioning of the European Union, the kind of like admin-y stuff that's not so fundamental. So yeah, the TEU is like your fundamental treaty and the TFEU is like your bit on top that helps to implement the principles of the TEU. Yeah, as I said, the courts or the judicature of the European Union have changed because of Lisbon in 2009. And like, so before you would have had the General Court and the Court of First Instance, so the GC and the CFI, but now you don't. Now you just have the Court of Justice of the European Union, or it's just called the Court of Justice sometimes, which is very, very confusing because that's what it was called before, but it's normally CJEU. Normally before it goes to the CJEU, it'll go to the General Court as a preliminary hearing. So yeah, basically the moral of the story of all that is it's all about the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty changed everything with the introduction of the TFEU. So my table of contents is the 8 topics I think you should cover for the FE1 for EU law. So Everyone listen. It's source of EU law, institutions, judicial review, which is 263, and preliminary reference, which is 267, supremacy and direct effect, member state liability, a la Frankovic, free movement of goods, free movement of capital or people and people or citizenship, and competition law, including state aid, Article 106. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. And I wouldn't bother doing free movement of capital. It never comes up. No, it does, the odd time, but don't worry about it. Okay, so looking at March 2020, which seems like a hell of a long time ago, there was an EU law exam, but you didn't have to sit it if you were afraid of COVID. You could come back and sit in August. So let's just go through what was. Okay, everybody. So the very first question was a lovely one to get you warmed up, and I think it's advisable that you do this as your first question to settle the nerves, and that's the general principles of EU law. But there was a few parts to the question. So he asked you to use examples from case law, and also how it emphasizes that the EU has to act in accordance with the rule of law. Now, this is quite interesting because, so my own chapter 1, sources of EU law, discusses EU law principles, okay? So that examples of these principles will be like supremacy, legitimate expectations, and fundamental rights. But actually, I think what he's looking for here is a kind of broader awareness. I'm going to be very clear now what I say here. A broader awareness of the framework of EU law, which I think he is irked by. And I touch on this in other subjects. So, as I've said many times before, the FE1 is a professional exam and people go and learn off answers and throw them back down. You have to understand that these people are working in this area daily and they have a real love for their area of law. And I know that doesn't really bother most of you because you're just trying to get in and out, get your 50, get out the gap. But everybody likes a little bit of honey in their tea. And everyone likes a little bit of ego massage or whatever you call it. So if this guy is saying in an essay, which is a bog standard essay that anyone can slap down about EU principles, but he throws in a little nugget at the end which mentions the rule of law. I would advise you guys, just if you have time, have a bit of understanding about why the EU came about at all. Think about it. World War II, coal and steel pact. Why did that come about? And how is that the European community? How were all of those precursors to the European Union we know and love today? And it's simply because it saw peace and stability in Europe. If you ever read the preambles of treaties, for example, the Irish Constitution, they're always looking for peace. And the rule of law is essential for peace because, like I said, if you have legitimate expectation, if I steal your handbag, you know for sure that I could go to jail. And that's because you have a legitimate expectation in the public authorities to implement the rule of law. Okay, so that's where he's coming from. I won't rabbit on about that. That's a rather philosophical and I quite like that. So that's just me. Anyway, question 2. So question 1 was an essay. Question 2 was also an essay question, which said, outline the roles of the Parliament, the Commission and the Council in the legislative process. And then he throws in another one, how has Lisbon made it more democratic? Again, your girl has you covered. If you go to chapter 2 of my lovely ebook, Institutions of the EU, I have all of that set out, and I also have a wee paragraph on how Lisbon made the whole thing more democratic. Question 3 was a problem question, and it was very long and wordy. It was about incinerators being made illegal in a directive. So always remember, of course, a directive does not have direct effect, even though you might get caught with that. And it's the usual problem question they have in the FE1, whereby there was a certain deadline for the regulations around the directive to be introduced in the member state in Ireland by way of statutory instrument in Ireland, and Ireland of course had missed the deadline. Here it was supposed to be in March, but Ireland didn't bring it in till June. And also there's some discrepancies around the way the regulations, the Irish regulations were written, which are kind of off kilter with the way the directive was written. And so to solve that problem question, you will go to my chapter 3, supremacy and direct effect. It's like ratty, inter-environmental Wallonie, Dufresne, Marshall v Southampton, and emanations of the state, all that good stuff, and you apply that to your problem question. Okay, so then we're going to move on to and you might need some EU remedies as well if your member state has been found to be in breach. Sorry, I thought I might say that as well. Then question 4 was an essay around individual concern, and again I have you covered in, so chapter 4 is direct effect in my book, and chapter 3 then is individual concern and proving you have individual concern, and that was question 4 of an essay. So far he has said a really easy paper. Question 5 I have here, freedom of movement of goods problem question. So I believe this is around a watch, triathlon watch. I'm not going to go down through the whole problem question because I am going to include it as part of the this ebook. But yeah, when it comes to freedom of movement of goods, you'll always have basically import and exports between two member states, and there'll be some favorable conditions in one member state. That's always the way it's going to be, and there can only be some favorable treatment if there's an exemption. Question 6 was a freedom of movement of people problem question. Now the best thing with those ones, there'll always be a few people involved, so I'm not going to go down through the problem question here, but it'll normally be like, there'll be normally like a granny whose son studied in Germany and came back after 5 years, like 5 years is the thing you're looking for because that's how you get citizenship, and then married a third country citizen, so that's like somebody from like Africa or America. There'll always be a few parties involved. The best thing to do is actually like make 3 circles, because normally 3 characters, and then set out what law applies to each of them or what conditions of EU citizenship applies to each of them, and if they fulfill those. That's just the easiest way to do it. I would do it by person. The nice thing as well is that that directive of the citizenship directive is all set out in your Blackstone, so it's all there for you. It's quite an easy question to do. Question 7 was the case law question, which I always tell you guys to avoid because it's completely unpredictable, although I do note that this year the case law was quite fine. So we'll say if you totally blanked one of your questions and you were like, okay, I know 3 of those, then you would have been fine. And then the final one, as usual, question 8 is normally competition law. He never really asked Article 101 and 102 on their own. This time he asked I believe 106. Yep, and how it relates, so that's state aid and how it relates to 101 and 102. So look, all in all, and that's in the chapter 8 of my ebook, all in all it was actually pretty easy exam. I thought if you sat that one, I believe there was probably a very high pass rate. There usually is for EU. It's not a tricky exam, it's actually probably the second easiest, I would say. I won't tell you what the easiest is, but I think it's the second easiest, and I don't suspect any of you will fail it, especially if you have my notes, because I literally hand you the answers. And best of luck with it if you're sitting it in August or September. As always, I'm here if you have any obscure questions, though EU is one where I usually don't get questions. So yeah, please stay tuned. I will be doing all the FE1s as I do twice yearly. I love doing it, and stay in touch on Instagram, here at YouTube, and email me if you have some personal question at info@lawhero.eu. Bye everybody.